He'd been writing for 2 hours straight, heedless of its instruction. He blinked away the dryness, unclamped his chunky, noise-canceling headphones, and took in the room. The heads of the other patrons genuflected before their own silvery computers and black phones. A few screens he could spy on displayed work applications, but most were social media feeds, the reflections waterfalling down the lenses of their users' trendy eyewear. He was the oldest person present, an increasingly frequent phenomenon of late, already aging out of the quinoa and chickpea salad coffee shop demographic at 46. His seniority was usurped by a man with springy coils of white hair who wandered in with a rolled-up copy of the Times, his shirt reading, "Super callous, fragile, racist, sexist, lying POTUS." He ordered a coffee with milk, couldn't hear over the music when the barista asked him what kind of milk, seemed bewildered by the plant-based varietal she then rattled off, and clarified that he'd just like a little whole milk. Paul had a soft spot for this species on the verge of extinction, the throwback Brooklyn liberal, and it always made him happy to spot one puttering about in its native habitat of Park Slope, the last neighborhood in which they throve. As he left to collect his daughter from her day camp, he passed the man's table. On the front page of his newspaper was a headline about fracking and earthquakes, the literal coming apart of the planet from greed and overconsumption. The despairing thought that typically resulted from an encounter with these old-timers, all that utopianism and organizing and protesting, for this blighted world, now led by the very worst member of their generation. You could blame venal politicians, avaricious bankers and CEOs, the yuppie defectors from their ranks, the vast swath of America that had remained indifferent or mulishly resistant. But maybe these people, the only ones who'd cared in their heyday, still hadn't sacrificed enough for the cause. And now, all that remained in their arsenal were acerbic, made-in-China t-shirts. His phone shivered with a call he'd been expecting for weeks. He doubled back to a corner of the room. "How are you, Paul?" his department chair asked after they said hello, and from the measured timbre and salesman-like deployment of his name, he could tell he was about to receive bad news. 2. Near the end of the spring semester, he'd lodged a request for a 6% raise with his next senior lecturer's contract, and his chair, Nathaniel Zielinski, had promised to do his best once he squared away the upcoming budget. The English department at their third-rate private college in Manhattan appreciated Paul's professionalism. He hadn't called in sick in 8 years. His student evaluations typically marked him as tough but fair. He kept his mouth shut at faculty meetings, if not his publishing profile, and he anticipated they would meet him in the middle, a satisfactory outcome. Next year, with the publication of the Luddite Manifesto forthcoming, he'd have a stronger negotiating hand as a viable candidate for a tenure-track professorship, either as an internal promotion at the college or somewhere else within a Metro-North ride to maintain weekend visits from Mabel. But now he was listening to Nathaniel's "my hands are tied" litany about general austerity, line items withdrawn, once slack belts refashioned into Victorian corsets, a completely predictable apologia. The administration would seize any excuse not to fairly compensate untenured faculty. Winning a 2% raise last time had required an undignified month of lobbying. "I take that as a no on 6%. Paul said. "Can you do 3? "I'm afraid to say the financial situation's substantially worse than that," Nathaniel told him. "All the departments are being forced to make payroll cuts, which means—" "I'm very sorry about this, Paul. We can only retain you on an adjunct instructor basis." A firing would have been almost more humane than a demotion. Senior lecturers had benefits and modest job